I'm going to begin with just stating some facts to give a context of the conclusion that I want to make. Um, since 1970, human conduct has extinguished over 60% of the world's mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles. Nature is not just a nice resource store, it is our life support system. In fact, our very bodies depend on the third lung of the planet. If any of us should lose a lung, we could still survive. But 50 to 80% of our oxygen comes from phytoplankton, kind of algae on the oceans. There's over 100,000 different species of this algae. And our very breath depends on its health. And its health depends on the climate of the planet, because that affects the alkaline acidic balance of the oceans. We can have plan A and plan B, but we can't have planet B. So there's an absolute necessity of protecting the health of the biosystem of the oceans. The rest of our oxygen largely comes from the rainforests. And similarly, it is our third lung. And no matter how much we spend on militaries, that third lung cannot be protected by technical means. That third lung can only be protected with a cooperative, common security agenda in which nations see the realism of our shared planet. Now, this kind of realism did not exist when the current system under which we're operating was created. In fact, in the 17th century, in order to separate Protestants who wanted to reform the faith traditions of Europe and the Catholics were slaughtering each other in massive numbers in Europe. And in order to separate them, to separate people from their religious fanaticism, people like you and I gathered in Westphalia and created the current structural system under which we're operating, the modern state. So its raison d'etre was to separate people. But today, a number of problems, pandemics, an integrated financial system, the climate, so many issues, controlling artificial intelligence, eliminating nuclear weapons before they eliminate us. The tools that we have to do this are largely based on the 17th century models. The other driving model of technology, which affects the climate, which affects all of us, is the multinational corporation, which was set up to make profit and not to live in harmony with the natural world. So we're trying to deal with two major institutions that affect the reality of the natural world, our world, that were set up for different purposes. So we need some change in thinking that's based on the realism of today. Herbert York, an American physicist who was active in the Manhattan Project. It's interesting. He was also his heritage was as an indigenous person. He was a leader in building the hydrogen bomb, where he led at the Lawrence Livermore Laboratories. He concluded from his lifetime experience, and I'll quote, "The unhappy fact is that whenever we have sought to solve a national security dilemma by technical means, we have in the end only made matters worse, because the problem is at heart not just technical, it's a problem of our core thinking of how we go about addressing problems." Here's an example of a success story in a region plagued by violence, Central America. Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua spend about $1.5 billion a year in military expenditures. One of its neighbors, Costa Rica, spends no money. It has no military. The life expectancy in Costa Rica is 81 years. That's almost 10 years more than any of its neighbors. Its infant mortality rate is dramatically lower. And the quality of life can't be compared. The sense of safety and productivity and enterprise amongst the people. So that's a simple example, a factual example that's indisputable, that Costa Rica, we do not see massive numbers of people coming to the borders of the United States from Costa Rica. We do see them from its neighbors, which spend a considerable amount of money on pursuing security through a means that obviously has not succeeded. The difference is one of culture and values. Now, we have a problem with our global system. Right now, we're spending more than $2 trillion on the planet pursuing technical means of security through more weaponry. I'm reminded of the quote from Publius Flavius Vegetius Renatus of the 5th century AD. That's the idea we're operating on for national security, in which he said, if you want peace, prepare for war. That's the motto. That's what's taught at every military academy. That's what's taught in our international relations and security establishments. And that's the basis of deterrence. But it's not the basis of realism. It's not the basis of what the U.S. Congress called for a risk assessment study, which was published recently, and talked about environmental security, nuclear weapons security as actual existential threats, not just small problems, but problems of massive, not just practical, but also moral imperative. We don't have a right to put the future of humanity at risk in pursuit of something we've created, the state. So the state was created to provide security for its people. But on these issues, national security, bereft of the reality in which we live in the 21st century, cannot do that. And I'm going to give one very good example of a success that was in which parliamentarians were needed to make it happen. The Six Nation Initiative at the height of the Cold War, in which the heads of state of Greece, Papandreou, Olof Palme from Sweden, Rajiv Gandhi from India, and Nuriye from Tanzania, and the heads of state of Mexico and Argentina went to Moscow and Washington and said, in essence, we cannot provide the first duty of our jobs to our people, which is to provide them with human security, with security in their lives and in their daily life, because of the conduct of you guys. And therefore, we call on you to act in a more responsible fashion. And Mikhail Gorbachev, one of the founders of the Global Security Institute, personally told me that those interventions were a powerful stimulus to the summits that took place between Gorbachev and Reagan that ended the Cold War. And the most important thing that they decided was in Geneva in 1985, when there was mutual demonization and multiple surrogate conflicts all around the planet. In paragraph 2 of their joint statement, they said, and they meant it, a nuclear war can never be won, must never be fought. But the most important line in that paragraph was, neither party shall seek military advantage over the other. And that was the beginning of conversations and humanizing the situation. Humanizing our security is the most important thing. That's why human security, putting people first, which is the first duty of the state, is the necessary rethinking. Now, it's indeed, as Joe Biden once said, don't tell me your values, show me your budget. The budgets of the world express the values of the people. And the people are ginned up in my country right now based on fear and divisiveness, and it's very dangerous. It's happening all over the world. That doesn't mean that we have to throw away the compass to get out of the chaos. The compass is based on the fact that there is no way for humanity to survive unless the nations of the world see their common interests as being more important than their divisions. There's just no way we can protect the oceans and our lungs and the other global issues that are realistic, measurable, scientifically verifiable, certain. Then, of course, there's the ongoing risks of daily basis of nuclear holocaust and the extraordinary expenditures in the trillions of dollars for these weapons. In South Asia, 70% of the children of the world are malnourished children in the world are in South Asia. 30% of the children in both Pakistan and India are malnourished. For them, war has already happened. Their lives are already compromised. Their health already undermined. They've lost their war. Their lives will be very difficult. And yet, billions and billions of dollars are being spent to pursue security by threatening annihilation. We now know that if less than 1% of the world's arsenals were to be actually used, well, they're used in threat each day, but they would throw at least 5 million tons of soot into the stratosphere and end the agricultural base that we all depend upon. Not to mention the extraordinary deaths from radiation, but mainly the very ecosystem of the planet and the lives of other species that we have no right to be destroying would be destroyed. So we've moved from mutually assured destruction to self-assured destruction, because one Trident submarine from my country and counterparts in other countries has enough firepower to actually cause this kind of destruction. And yet we have over 13,000 of these devices on the ready as we speak. Well, it's less than 13,000 on the ready, 13,000 in existence, just a few thousand on the ready. But all we need is less than 200. So we need a fundamental challenge to this madness. And it has to go up the political ladder, and parliamentarians have to push their heads of state to speak out against this madness and call for realism. And what is that realism? It is putting people first, how people actually live. And the tool for nations to do that, because we're not talking about ending the nation state, but the tool for doing this is common security and realism. Yes, we need local governance to govern our neighborhoods. We need cities and governance of cities. We need states and we need nations, but we also need global cooperation for the global threats that we face today that did not exist when we created the institutions. So I call upon you as parliamentarians who are elected to represent the interests of their people. We have an education gap. The people need to understand that the local dilemmas they have are largely arising from global dilemmas. And every issue, so many issues of our daily lives, we should have learned this with COVID. COVID did not recognize passports. COVID did not recognize race, religion, gender. It said all human beings are one family. The fact is, that's a truth. Every one of us has 99.9% of our DNA is the same. The differences between any of us, between you and I, is very small. So we're in a period in which our choice is either to continue the downward spiral of adversity. The biggest cost of nuclear weapons, in my opinion, is they institutionalize adversity and they legitimize the worst of human conduct, the willingness to destroy the future. Those two are not measurable by the amount of weapons we have. They come from our ideas. So there's a duty right now, and an emergency of the biggest gap is not just economic. It's in ideas. It's in our thinking. We have to raise the thinking of the planet, the people, to realism, and that is what common security is about. And that is something that there's numerous instances in which it can be done. It has to be done, but it is mainly, in my opinion, It is mainly a change of thinking that's necessary. And that's why this kind of conversation is so important. And thank you for giving me this moment to just make one of numerous points to get to the same point. We need to educate and rethink what is realism in security. Thank you very much.